So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time within 20 minutes. Now, today we are going to be covering Monday, October 7th, 2024's current affairs. And the important news items that I have shortlisted for this lecture. Remember, I shortlist important news items from the newspaper. Okay, I'm not covering all the news events featuring in the newspapers because all of them are not important. Only selected news items are important from the perspective of civil services examination, right? So we only discuss important items that would feature in your exams. Now, the important news items that featured in October 7th newspaper are as following. So let's take a look at the topics of the day. Okay. In total, we are going to be discussing four topics, and these four topics are very, very, very important from an examination perspective. Okay. Number one is Maldives president in New Delhi. Maldives president Mohammad Muizzu is in New Delhi, and this is a bit of a surprise because he has been on an anti-India rant since he has been elected president. Even before that, while contesting for the elections of while contesting for presidential elections in Maldives, Mohammad Muizzu had an anti-India rant, but he has changed his course. Why he did that? Why is Maldives thinking that it cannot do anything without India? We have to discuss that. So we'll be discussing this news item. Then we'll talk about a controversial eco-sensitive zone notification around Gir forest in Gujarat. So we'll not be focusing on controversy, we'll be basically focusing on what eco-sensitive zones are, and we'll talk about Gir forest because it is a special forest. It is the only forest that houses Asiatic lions. India does not have any lions anymore except Gir forests. Okay, Asiatic lions. The other lions that are in the world are African lions, which are in Africa. So we'll talk about this. Then recently, Supreme Court actually quashed various discriminatory rules in various prison manuals of different states. Okay, there were certain rules in the prison manuals on how to administer the jails of different states. There were certain rules that were discriminatory in nature. They discriminated on the basis of caste. They discriminated on the basis of ethnicity. So Supreme Court has quashed these rules by saying that they violate fundamental rights of prison mates. So we talk about these rules and what sort of fundamental rights did they violate. And in the end, we'll talk about the elephant census. Okay, government of India has actually refused to make it public, or the government of India has actually not released the report of elephant census, the latest elephant census, and this has created a bit of controversy. But we'll talk about how elephants are counted, what is elephant census, who conducts it, and why elephants are important. Okay, so we'll talk about these four news items, very important. Starting with first topic, Maldives president in New Delhi. Okay, now Dr. Mohammad Muizzu, president of Maldives, is now in New Delhi on a state visit. Now, when he was fighting for presidential elections, he had a pretty strong anti-India stance. In fact, his election slogan was "Go Back India." Now, what did he mean by "Go Back India"? Basically, what he did was there are various Indian troops, Indian army personnel, Indian troops stationed in Maldives. Okay, there are various, many types of and many Indian troops that are stationed in Maldives. And the reason why Indian troops are stationed in Maldives is to train Maldivian troops and to take care of various rescue operations in Maldives. Okay, but basically to train Maldivian troops. But there was a section in Maldives that was not happy with the presence of Indian troops in Maldives. That is why Mohammad Muizzu capitalized on that sentiment and he said his election slogan was that "Go Back India." By that, he meant that once he gets elected, he will make sure that all Indian troops go back to their country. They are not welcome in India anymore. Okay. Then he got elected. Then also, he did not dilute his anti India stance. First of all, generally, all Maldivian presidents, when they get elected, their first visit is to India. Okay. But Mohammad Muizzu's first diplomatic visit was to China, and he was getting closer to Turkey in a very evident diplomatic rebuke to India. He was getting close to China. He was having a very pro China stance. He was having a very anti India stance. Plus, many of his ministers wrote nasty things about Prime Minister Modi on Twitter. That created a lot of enmity between the two countries. But now, after settling in, Mohammad Muizzu is realizing that his country cannot do anything without India. And if his country antagonizes India, it's very difficult for them to survive. And that is why now he has changed tactics and now is warming up to India. Okay. Plus, Maldives is in a bit of economic crisis. Maldives is actually suffering from some economic difficulties, and Maldives knows that without India's help, it is very difficult for them to get out of this economic crisis, and that is why he's changing tactics. Though personally, he might not like India. Well, we don't know. We do not know what he wants personally. But initially, he was very anti-India, but now he's warming up to India. Okay, his election campaign was India Out movement, but now he's warming up and now he's making statements that Maldives is a very good friend of India. Maldives and India are interdependent and all that stuff. So this is a very significant change of tactics. Now the thing is, why is Maldives warming up in such a huge way to India? Okay, what has happened in Maldives? Well, basically, there is a very strong economic crisis in Maldives. Okay, Maldives is looking at a debt default of its foreign exchange. Maldives has only 440 million dollars, US dollars of foreign exchange left. This can only sustain their imports for 1.5 months. So they have very little foreign exchange reserves. Okay. Plus, last month, an international rating agency, Moody's, they downgraded Maldives' credit rating. And they say that it is because of the default risks. The debt that Maldives has taken from the world, Maldives might default on that. Okay. Now, what is Muizu expecting from India? Has come to India because he wants some financial aid. Muizu is also requesting a currency swap arrangement, okay, where Maldivian currency would be swapped with Indian currency, so that so that he can save his precious foreign exchange reserves. Plus, Muizu is also looking for debt from India so that it can save its economy. Okay. Now, these economic talks or these economic relations talk would happen in Hyderabad House in New Delhi. Basically. Muizu is staying there, and Muizu is going to have meetings over there. Clear? Muizu knows that China cannot completely bail it out. Though initially Muizu thought that he will go to China and China will solve all its economic problems. But China won't be able to solve all economic problems that Maldives faces. Okay? And this is good news for India because Maldives is in a very strategic location, as you can see on this map. It is strategically located in the Indian Ocean. This is India's territory of Lakshadweep. Okay. And not far off is Maldives. It is strategically located. And if we have an anti Indian government over here, then India needs to worry if India wants to maintain its hegemony in the Indian Ocean. So, this is welcome news for India. And it's good that Maldives has realized its mistake. Its political leadership has realized their mistake and they're warming up to India. Because, after all, we are maritime neighbors and we cannot do without each other. All right? Now, basically, what is Maldives seeking? We have discussed that it is seeking a currency swap arrangement. It is also looking for debt from India to save its low foreign exchange reserves. It is also looking for financial aid because, as you know, it has only $440 million of foreign exchange reserves left. Now, India has already offered financial support worth $1.4 billion, but that is for infrastructure and development projects. Plus, Maldives is also suffering because many Indian tourists have rejected the idea of visiting Maldives. Okay, because of that Twitter war between various ministers from in the Maldives government, and they took jibes at Prime Minister Modi. So it basically led to a Twitter war of sorts. And from then onwards, India decided, or various Indian tourists decided, that they won't visit Maldives. Now, Maldives' economy depends heavily on tourism, and if Maldives doesn't take care of that, then it might suffer. And that is why Muizu has asked Indian tourists to come back to the island because Indians support Maldivian economy. Okay. According to the Maldivian news publication Ashadha, the number of Indian tourists visiting Maldives had dropped by 50,000, resulting in a loss of $150 million. Okay. In fact, Indians are the top five nationalities that visit Maldives for tourism. So Maldives is heavily dependent on India for tourism, for financial aid, and for, well, good relations. It is heavily dependent. Maldives' survival, economic survival, depends on India. And it's good that Maldivian president has realized that. Okay, so that was in the news. Now let's move on to another controversial news, which is regarding eco-sensitive zone around Gir forests. Okay, now what was the controversial part? Why Gir forests are in news? Gir forest is in news. On September 18th, Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change published a draft notification proposing to notify 3,328 square kilometers around Gir Forest as eco-sensitive zone. So, Environment Ministry actually notified that they would designate this much area around Gir Forest as eco-sensitive zones. Okay. Later, they had to reduce that because of popular opinion against the development of eco-sensitive zone. Now, why is that? First of all, you need to know what eco-sensitive zones are. You see, generally around protected areas. Now, what are protected areas? Well, you've heard about national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, right? These are protected areas which are created to protect the biodiversity in that region. Now, around these protected areas, let's suppose this is a national park. Okay, there is no economic activity allowed in this area. Now, around this national park, there is a buffer zone. Okay, this buffer zone is generally called an eco-sensitive area. And in this buffer zone, economic activity is allowed, but it is heavily regulated and restricted. Restricted economic activity is allowed. Okay, and outside eco-sensitive zone, well, normal people can live. Normal urban areas can be there. This is done because sometimes many animals come out of national parks. Okay, and if there is economic activity around national parks, well, then there it leads to man-animal conflict because people might have settled here. So people are generally settled beyond the eco-sensitive areas, though generally people live around these areas because there are villages. But economic activity or tourism activity is not that high around these areas. Okay, so these eco-sensitive areas are created as a buffer zone between national parks and the urban settlements or the human settlements. Okay, now villages around Gir forests are not happy with the creation of eco-sensitive zones around Gir forest. Why? Because various economic activities would get restricted and people's livelihood depend on these economic activities. Therefore, villages have been protesting against the development of large eco-sensitive zone around Gir forest. But government wants to create that ESZ, eco-sensitive zone, to protect various biodiversity, to protect various species residing in these areas. So there is a conflict. People don't want this eco-sensitive zone because people want good flourishing economic activity for their livelihood, but government also wants to preserve the species of this national park. So that is why there is this problem. Okay, forest officer said the reduction was needed to accommodate the basic needs of people living around the forest because various economic activities of people have been would get restricted if this entire area is declared as an eco-sensitive zone. Okay, I hope now you understood the entire controversy. Now let's talk about Gir protected area. Okay, now this entire protected area lies in Gujarat and in three districts of Gujarat. These are Junagadh, Amreli, and Gir Somnath. Okay, and basically this is the Saurashtra region of Gujarat, not the Kutch region, Saurashtra region. These three districts lie in Saurashtra region of Gujarat, and the entire Gir protected area is spread around these three districts. Now, this entire protected area includes Gir National Park, Gir Wildlife Sanctuary, Pania Wildlife Sanctuary, and Mithiala Wildlife Sanctuary. Okay, this entire area is known as Gir protected area. Now, why is this area special? Because it is the last remaining habitat for Asiatic lions. Otherwise, Asiatic lions are extinct. There was a time when lions used to be in Africa. Those were known as African lions, and in Asia. These were known as Asiatic lions, and they were found in the Indian subcontinent. But they were hunted down, and many other problems arose. And that is why Asiatic lions are now only restricted to Gir forest. So we need to protect Gir forest. Okay. In fact, it is Gujarat's largest compact tract of protected forest, and is also surrounded by high density of human settlements. Because it is surrounded by high density of human settlements, that is why they were trying to create an eco-sensitive zone. Okay, so as to reduce this density, but people are protesting against it. Okay, that is the controversy. Now, another question that might be asked from you guys can be, what are eco-sensitive zones? So, National Environment Policy of 2006 actually gave a proper definition of eco-sensitive zones. These are zones or areas with identified environmental resources having incomparable values which require special attention for their conservation. Okay, this is the official definition. But basically, eco-sensitive zones are buffer areas around protected areas. Okay, Because in protected areas, very little human activity is allowed. And you cannot have high human activity and very low human activity areas as neighbors. You need a buffer area between them, because, or else, it would lead to man animal conflict. And all the conservation efforts for various species would be in vain, would get exhausted, or would be wasted. Okay, that is why you need eco-sensitive zones. Okay, now there is no commercial mining around allowed in these eco-sensitive zones. Stone quarrying is not allowed. Big hydroelectric projects are not allowed. Polluting industries are not allowed in ESZs. Commercial activities are allowed, like tourism, hotels, and all that stuff, but these are also highly regulated. So these eco-sensitive zones are buffer areas where limited human activity is allowed. In protected areas, no human activity is allowed. And areas outside ESZs have full economic or human activity. Okay, that is why government is establishing ESZ around Gir forests, because Gir forests are strategically very important. Okay, that's about it. Now let's move on to our third news item, which is discriminatory rules in the state prison manuals. Now, what has Supreme Court done? Look, various states have prisons, okay, jails, and they have various rules. These prisons have various rules, and these rules actually govern the administration of these jails. Okay, now these rules are mentioned in these prison manuals. Now, many people found that some of these rules were very discriminatory. Okay, like for example, allocation of work. Like there are rules regarding allocation of work among prison mates. Okay, so all the cooking jobs and normal jobs, cooking, kitchen jobs, they were given to people from the high caste, and all the cleaning jobs were given to people from the lower caste. Now, this was mentioned in the prison manuals. Okay, now this is a very discriminatory practice. This is caste based allocation of work. Menial jobs were given to lower caste people, and that was discriminatory, but it was mentioned in prison manuals, right? Now, this is problematic. Okay, then there were other rules as well, various other rules that were discriminatory in nature. And people found them discriminatory, and that is why they filed a petition in Supreme Court, and Supreme Court struck down these rules. Supreme Court said that these rules reinforce caste differences and target members of marginalized communities. Okay? Now, some of these rules actually discriminated against the so-called criminal tribes. Okay? We don't use the term criminal tribes anymore. We use the term denotified tribes. But these rules actually discriminated against these criminal tribes also. Okay? Now that is problematic. They discriminated against so-called lower caste people. They discriminated against criminal tribes. Now in 1871, the Britishers actually passed Criminal Tribes Act. Under this Criminal Tribes Act, the Britishers actually declared a particular group of people as criminal tribe. Now, these criminal tribes, these groups of people were historically deemed by the Britishers as people who are habitual offenders, okay, habitual violators of law. So, there were particular tribes of people that were declared criminal by the Britishers. And for that, they launched Criminal Tribes Act. These tribes were forced to live in designated locations. There were settlements in which they were forced to live. They had to report to the police every now and then. There were various draconian restrictions imposed on them. And who would identify these criminal groups of people, or these groups of people? Well, the British Raj would do that. So British actually designated certain tribes of people as criminal tribes. Okay, now this was discriminatory practice done by the Britishers. So in 1952, the Indian government, the independent Indian government, actually repealed this law, and these tribes were given a new name called denotified tribes. They were no longer criminal tribes. But the problem is that the prison rules related to criminal tribes still persist. Okay, this law was repealed, but various rules in the prison manuals still discriminate against these criminal tribes. They were not changed, and the Supreme Court actually declared or quashed these rules. So there was a legacy regarding criminal tribes, but the law was repealed, their name was changed, but the rules regarding their governance in the prisons, in the jails of India, that wasn't changed. And that is what has been sorted out by the Honorable Supreme Court. Okay. Now, Supreme Court has also cited various fundamental rights of prisoners. Supreme Court said that these prison rules actually violated many fundamental rights that the prisoners had. Okay. These rights were right to equality, right against discrimination. Like I mentioned, there were certain caste discrimination happening. Then abolition of untouchability is there because untouchability was also being practiced through these rules. Then right to life with dignity and prohibition of forced labor. Okay, these are the fundamental rights that were being violated for these prisoners through these rules in the state prison manuals. So Supreme Court has said that prisoners have these rights, and for that reason, they actually decided to quash these rules. All right. Okay. And let's move on to our last news item, which is elephant census. Environment Ministry's Elephant Census Report, which is officially called Status of Elephant in India 2022-23, hasn't been released due to delay in the census in the northeast. So the counting of elephants in the northeastern region was not complete, and that is why this report hasn't been made public. Now, there are certain facts that you need to know about elephant census. First of all, elephant census is conducted every 5 years. It is conducted by Wildlife Institute of India, which is a autonomous body under Environment Ministry. Now, this report hasn't been made public, but some newspaper organizations have accessed certain pages of this report, and they have found that elephant population numbers have declined in east, central, and southern India. The largest decline was seen by West Bengal, then Jharkhand, Odisha, and Kerala. So, elephant population numbers are declining as per this report. Now, this report has also mentioned the reasons for this decline. Okay, first of all, they are saying that there has been a mushrooming of development projects, mining projects, infrastructure projects, which actually encroach upon the areas reserved for elephant habitat. So, elephant habitat is getting destroyed because of developmental projects. Okay, plus the report cited that this year's census is being conducted through refined methodologies. The earlier censuses did not have proper good methodologies, and maybe that is why those previous censuses had inflated numbers. But now that we have improved our methodology, so some numbers might have declined. So maybe the decline in this year's census is due to the change in methodology also. Plus, the third reason is that southern population or elephants population in southern India has declined considerably. And one of the reasons is that in the Western Ghats, there are a lot of coffee and tea plantations. And these coffee and tea plantations have actually destroyed elephant habitat. Okay? There used to be a common contiguous means a single zone of elephants between Maharashtra and Kerala. This has been broken up because of coffee and tea plantations. Now, Maharashtrian elephants are in one area and Keralite elephants are in other area. Earlier, they could move around in this area, but now this area has been broken. So this has also impacted their numbers. Okay. There are certain other rules also that you need to be familiar with regarding elephants. First of all, there is this thing called captive elephant transfer of transport rules. These rules actually govern how elephants can be used for religious or any other purpose in southern India, temples and all that. Okay. So this is just factual information. I don't think it will feature in your examination, but just in case. So read this also. All right. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation, though it would add more value if you would revise this lecture also. And you can revise this lecture by downloading the PDF file for this lecture. Where is this PDF file available? It is available on our Telegram channel. And how can you access our Telegram channel? Well, in the comment section below this video, you'll find a link to our Telegram channel. You just have to click on that link. You'll be routed to our Telegram channel. There you have to follow the channel and download the PDF for not just this lecture, but all the other lectures featuring on our YouTube channel. All right. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone.